The wonderful storyteller Jack Shea has a story called The Rock, and it's a fitting one for today. And it's about an 8th grade teacher who wanted to produce a passion play with his students. But they had so many students that she ran out of roles to cast. All the roles were taken. So she had to assign some of the students inanimate objects as their roles. So you had some students being the 30 silver pieces, the coins that were tossed. You had a student cast as the tree that Judas hung from. Well, you get the idea. So the 3rd grade was invited to the play, and there was one role still to be cast, and that was the rock that rolled away from the tomb. And there was one boy in the class that the teacher knew would be the perfect rock. Let's say he was larger than a bread box. And when he put his hands on his ankles and he somersaulted, he looked just like a boulder. So that was the rock. So the 3rd grade came and the play started, and a little girl no bigger than Tinkerbell was the angel, and it came to the part of the resurrection, and she put her little finger on the rock, and he put his hands on his ankles, and he rolled, and everybody cheered, "Rock! Rock!" And thus a star was born. And after the performance, he was even signing autographs, the rock. But the teacher did not think that maybe all of this attention was such a good idea. So she called him aside and she said, "John, for the next performance, I want you to be the tree that Judas hung himself on." Well, John did not like this. And he said, "No, I like being the rock." And she said, "Well, why do you like being the rock?" And he said, "Because I like letting Jesus out of the tomb." And the teacher said, "But John, the rock isn't rolled away so that Jesus can get out of the tomb. He's already gone. The rock is rolled away so that the women can see in the tomb." And John thought for a moment and said, "Well, if the rock is still in front of the hole, then how did Jesus get out?" And the teacher thought for a moment about how to respond to this theological question when suddenly John came up with his own answer. And he looked at his teacher and he said, "Well, I guess really for God, rocks are no big deal, are they?" And the teacher got a little choked up. And she looked at John and she said, "John, you continue playing the rock because you obviously know the role so well." Rocks are no big deal for God anyway, are they? That is really the heart of what we celebrate on this Easter Sunday, this day of Jesus' resurrection. That rocks, burden, suffering, even death is no big deal for God anyway. And yet, of course, sometimes in our lives, it doesn't necessarily feel or seem that way. We can feel like a boulder is sitting on us when we're sick or homebound or infirmed, or we have stuff going on in our families that we're distraught about, or financial worries, or worried about our kids, and we feel like the rock is sitting here. We feel the life being sucked out of us. We feel that maybe parts of us are dead or are dying. Well, the good news today, the good news that we preach, that Jesus has risen, is that the suffering part, the death part, the boulder part is not the final word. Because the boulder rolled away. Jesus was out of the tomb. He lives. And because he lives, our lives are radically transformed. So when you feel like the boulder is sitting on top of you, when you feel in some way that you can't really move forward because of the struggle, remember what we celebrate today. Remember the good news that even though there is suffering, it's not the final word. 3 days later, after the crucifixion, Jesus rose from the dead. The tomb was empty. The rock was thrown aside. So too with the rocks of our lives.